I was like very shy, very nervous about speaking in public, but I was like, these people are like 19 and 20 and 21, this is like unbelievable. So afterwards, myself and my friends got beer and we got pizza, and then I decided I'm going to try and learn how to speak in public, even though I was completely incompetent and terrible at the time. And so I got involved in the first kind of maiden speakers competition, got knocked out in the first round, but then hung around enough that people were like, fuck, we're going to have to involve this person in our society. And then over time, I kind of overcame my fear of speaking in public, and then I eventually started organizing debates. So I started trying to figure out how I could hustle people from the US or from the UK or elsewhere in the world to come to Ireland with no resources. And so I was randomly acquiring those skills. And yeah, that was
what typically take us through. You're just you're a kid out of college.
Yeah.
How do you get on? How do you even connect to one of these Silicon Valley?
Well, so the thing, I mean, well, first of all, email started to be a thing when I was in college. It was a long time ago. But so in like 2004, pretty much everybody had email. And so up until that point, the society, the field, only sent letters. Fucking retarded. Let's just send emails, and we'll have a much quicker and better response rate. And then so I started figuring out how to guess basically people's email addresses, because email addresses can probably only be like 10 versions of it. So whether it's Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie, inevitably their email address is something like ajolie or angelina.jolie@hotmail.com at the time. So that was, I was kind of just doing those little hacks. So then when it came to trying to get in contact with a guy from Skype, I was like, I bet you Nicholas, the founder of Skype's username on Skype is Nicholas. And then so I basically spammed Nicholas on Skype, because you can message people on Skype and they can't stop it, and I kept messaging And then Jay knows Nicholas, so he's not the first person in the world to jump on a Skype call, but eventually he was like, God, this guy's so persistent. And I got on a call with Nicholas, and eventually said, hey, we're organising this pub crawl in Dublin, maybe that's of interest to you. And then there's a conference where you have to speak to other entrepreneurs, and he's like, oh, I'm actually genuinely interested in that. And then once the founder of Skype said he was going to come, then I went to the founder of Twitter, and the founder of YouTube, and then it kind of snowballed from there. And then when they came, I had sat through so many bad debates and so many terrible interviews that I had a kind of sense for at least how the content should run. Just like keeping it kind of short and stuff like that. So all of these skills you pick up along the way, I never thought when I was involved in the Phil or any other student publications, nothing in my head was saying, I am learning important skills that I will use in approximately 5 years' time. That wasn't part of the plan at all. It just all kind of just started clicking in 2010.
The website is taking on graduates next year, 20, in May and September, I think, and the 12-month stints in Westland. So from what you've just said, what kind of skills or what kind of people will you be looking for?
Well, it's very diverse. So obviously there's kind of more general positions where, when I came out of college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I mean, does everybody here know what they want to do? I'm sure most people just don't know what they want to do. So oftentimes when you're going into a job, having the flexibility to move around in different areas is great. But then we have very specific teams like engineering and data science and design, which requires a very specific skill set. If you can't code, it just doesn't really work, you being on the engineering team. Yeah, we've just got lots of different positions, and we've hired maybe, I think it's 37 people so far this quarter, which is a very American term, for the last 3 months. And yeah, we have a careers website, you can check it out. We just call out the office.
Jay, when did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and were going to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I first was kind of drawn into, should I do a traditional career? And for me, the one that I got closest to was law. But I wanted to sort of, test out whether that would be something that I really wanted to do or not. And so I managed to get an internship at a place called the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard Law School, which at the time, I was in college, didn't take any interns, and was kind of the place where the best people were practicing, internet law, intellectual property law, cyber law, all of that kind of stuff. And my experience there, talking to particularly the students, was that, you know, it was pretty clear that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur and that was just looking for a way to kind of hedge my bets, and that their advice was it would be a complete waste of 3 years of my life to, as it is in the US, to go to law school, and then if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I should just do that. And so that advice was given to me repeatedly by several different students, and so I thought that I, you know, shouldn't fight the market and should go right into it. I didn't really have, you know, an idea or sort of, you know, what I felt were the resources to do it. But I watched as, you know, Google grew up, Amazon grew up, eBay grew up, all while I was in college, and then I watched the bubble burst, you know, until 2001, and, you know, the job that I had with the great potential, you know, funded startup actually exploded with that. So I decided that I would go to MIT to kill time for a year.
That's the London School of Economics.
That's London School of Economics, yeah, sorry. And, you know, to do the master's degree in something that I was really interested in, but had no relevance to what I would do later. And one thing I did was take an entrepreneurship course and then basically learn some kind of, you know, brick and mortar skills about what to, you know, what to do, how to raise finance, etc. And then I met up with a university friend who had a problem with his same-day courier deliveries. He was an office manager for a ship brokering company, and even one thing led to another. So, you know, it really is about understanding that it's what you want to do. Working in a startup, I think, is a great experience. We're starting a startup, and, you know, and then when you get that first opportunity, take, you know, because they don't come along very often, right? And the startups really have to come along.
What would be your biggest piece of advice, other than that, to graduate students considering working at a startup?
Well, you know, so one would be to actually do it, because it's very easy. You know, I look back to my university reunions, and, you know, of course, during the time that everybody is, you know, at college, you very often say to yourself and other people like, oh, I'm not going to do some conformist stuff and be an investment banker or work in finance or private equity or, you know, in accounting or whatever. You know, I'm going to do something really, you know, really interesting. I'm going to be a writer, or, you know, I'm going to be an entrepreneur or whatever it is. And I'll tell you, you go back to these 10-year reunions, and a third of the people, it is like a statistical fact that you map on every class. A third of the people are investment bankers or in some form of finance. You know, a third of the people are lawyers. You know, and then maybe a third of the people are doing something else. They're teachers and entrepreneurs and, you know, lobster boat captains and whatever.
It's not a very lively class.
Well, maybe lobster boat captains should be making this. But no, I think that, so I think, you know, it is very easy to get sucked into the life of a steady and secure job that has incremental pay raises and bonus schemes that are designed to keep you exactly where you are and nowhere else. To the extent where, you know, after a while, it will just be impossible for you to leave. So I have friends who have been in finance for 10 or 15 years, and the compensation structure is, you know, really perfectly engineered to keep you there, no matter what, to make it an irrational decision to leave. And, you know, it's kind of sad because they're not really that happy with what they do, but it's the way it is. So I'd encourage all of you to at least take that first jump, even if not starting your own company and working in a startup, because you have very little to lose at this point.
But startups fail. I mean, there's a huge failure rate. That doesn't really suit everyone.
Well, hey man, you know, banks fail, you know, as well. Graduates are the first to get cut, you know, when there's a financial crisis. So, you know, I don't know how to quantify that risk, except to say that actually the risk is always going to be there. It's just a fact of, you know, life and then the life that you choose. The reward is much higher in a number of different ways: quality of life, job satisfaction, financial rewards, all of those kind of things.
Is the quality of life much higher in a startup than it is in an institutional job?
Maybe I should have just said job satisfaction. No, but I think it is. It depends on what you define as quality of life. You know, the work-life balance in, you know, a law firm, top law firm, or a top, you know, financial services firm is terrible. You know, guys are working, you do 100 hours a week, they have learned that there are only 168 hours in a week, like, it is, you know, and you're the person that for years or even decades is doing all the work, and so you're lucky enough to become partner and to be able to delegate to, you know, to people below. That's just the way that those institutions and organizations are structured.
And how does that differ from startups?
Well, I think, you know, startups by their very nature have less people, so they're less hierarchical and generally, you know, more flat. So you can rise much faster. I mean, Paddy's got some great examples of this in this organization. You know, and your ideas can actually make a difference to what the company does. And you don't sit around on these kind of, you know, huge conference calls where nothing actually happens. I mean, you know, once you actually are in a startup for a while and you start experiencing what company culture is in large companies, you just wonder, like, you're like, no wonder we don't do that because we would never be around, right? Like, we couldn't possibly waste that much time.
How do you, you see?
Yeah, I've met so many, you know, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, many who've done incredible things, but also an incredible amount that have not succeeded. And I think risk is relative. Risk is something that's relative to your time of life. So if you're 40 years of age and you decide, hey, I'm going to build a business, I'm going to go out and I'm going to either work for a high-risk startup or I'm going to do a high-risk thing and start my own company, then I think if you get knocked down, it's pretty hard getting back up because, you know, your career trajectory, your career path has been very locked in place, and suddenly you just jump ship for 2 or 3 years. That could be a terrible thing for the rest of your life. When you're 30, that's less so, and when you're in your 20s, I mean, you can keep on getting knocked down. You just get back up again. It doesn't really matter. Your tolerance for risk in those first few years after college is incredibly high. So while society, in a sense, says, no, you should get started on your career, I actually, when I look at many of the executives now at some of the, you know, leading tech companies in the world, actually their first 3 or 4 years, some of them were lobster fishing. Like literally, some of them became poets in India. They went on all of these obscure paths, and then they came back. Why? Because they learned things that their peer group wasn't possibly learning. So the rest of their peer group was all just kind of filing into corporate America, or corporate Ireland, or corporate England, and doing these kind of very generalist roles. And then by the time they were 30, wasn't much that differentiated them, and they couldn't get off this kind of path that they were now on because it was too risky. So I think your 20s is an incredible time. Then the question is, well, what do you do in your 20s? Do you go and start a company, or do you go and maybe work for other people that have started a company? And my feeling is, if you look at the actual data, it tends that the most successful entrepreneurs, and this is borne out in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, tend to be in their 30s when they start out. This idea of somebody dropping out of college and building a multi-billion-dollar company, the reason you hear about it so much is because it's very, very rare. And that's what makes it so interesting. Actually, the truth is the failure rate of a lot of entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs in their 20s and in their 40s, is higher than in your 30s. Don't know why. That's just a pattern. So then the question is, okay, so it turns out a lot of these people in their 30s, if you look at the pattern and certainly listen to a lot of, like, you know, very successful investors, they'll say that many of these first-time entrepreneurs in their 30s have actually gone and worked in other fast-growing companies before. So then the question for you is, okay, I'm going to leave college. What company should I go and work for? And I think the best answer to that question is not to look at the company, but look at the team or the people that you're going to join. And then you got to ask yourself, am I going to learn an enormous amount from these people in a very short space of time that I can then maybe take elsewhere with me? It's quite a mercenary decision, but I think it's ultimately the best decision. Join a company on the basis of the people you'll be surrounded by. Don't necessarily join the company because it's raised a whole ton of money or it keeps appearing in the media. Figure out who you're going to end up working with, and do you really think you can learn an enormous amount of things from the person that will be your team lead or the team that you're going to be on? And that would be my